Leadership requires constant reflection and adaptation. Many women leaders have expressed a need to unlearn certain mindsets and practices across different stages of their careers. In this special edition of Her Story, we asked a few of our guests, what is one thing that you believed early on in your career that you no longer believe? First, we hear from Esther Farkas, Senior Vice President of Corporate Development and Chief Legal Officer of Unite Us, a technology company focused on building health and social care networks.
When I was coming up in the law firm environment, I think every advice you gave was seen as having to be just essentially perfect, basically. If you don't, before you write an email, before you ever advise a client, if you haven't done 5 to 10 hours of work checking into it, then you haven't done it right. And I'd say it took me probably almost a decade to unlearn that, and to say sometimes you can just, one, you can make mistakes, and you have to own the mistakes, but I think if you own those mistakes, people understand. And two, I do have, at some point, you have the experience and you have the knowledge to be able to advise without doing hours and hours of work. And you should always do your research, and you should always do work. But this idea that everything that you say and everything you write down has to be absolutely perfect and unimpeachable, I think just, can paralyze people. And I think that kind of is the biggest thing. And I still obviously I do my best, and I really try and not make huge mistakes, but I see that not everything I say is unimpeachable, and something I said might be wrong, and someone may come back to me and say, look, think about this differently, and then I'll learn from that and think about it differently, and I don't have to feel bad about not getting it completely right. So I think that particularly for women, I found it can be paralyzing. I think women have this idea that they have to always be perfect at all times. And I think when you reinforce that with that kind of work environment, I think you can people won't take risks. They won't innovate, they won't go past their point of comfort, which is what you really need, I think, to move the needle.
Dr. Geeta Nayyar is the General Manager of Healthcare and Life Sciences and the Executive Medical Director of Salesforce, a cloud-based software company with CRM capabilities.
I think as a doc and as someone in the medical world, a lot of us are perfectionists, and a lot of us are alphas, right? Alpha women, alpha men. And I certainly fall into that category. And so one of my mentors had said to me, if you try to make everything perfect, you'll never get anything done. Don't be so afraid to just move forward, particularly in software where, they often release things and then evolve them as they go. It's very different in medicine where we like to nail it on the first go because, there are lives at stake. So just learning through that process, that making progress includes failures or mistakes or just learnings as you go, and that is also the natural course of business and of life. So that's probably one of the biggest learnings that I've had.
Next is Dr. Vivian Lee, President of Health Platforms at Verily Life Sciences, a life sciences research organization affiliated with Alphabet.
I remember early on in my career when I had a leadership role, and my approach to the problem, which was to develop a strategy, I was charged with building this program and developing a strategy for doing it. And my approach was to bring a number of people to the table and have a discussion and get their input about it. And I remember afterwards, one of the leaders pulled me aside, who was somebody who was very distinguished and senior to me. And they said, Vivian, that's not how you lead. You can't ask everybody what they think. You need to just tell them. That's what a strong leader does. And I remember thinking, I don't think so. For me, I want to hear the input. It doesn't mean I have to do what you've told me, but certainly the input is incredibly invaluable. And so, yes, there definitely have been times when I felt like maybe it's important to stick to what works for you, and what works for me has worked out okay.
Wrapping us up is Miriam Paramore, President and Chief Strategy Officer of OptimizeRx, a digital communications platform focused on improving access and adherence to medication for patients.
We all deal with the imposter syndrome, but if you put the female expectation, and then in my case, the additional cultural Southeastern, Bible Belt, sort of additional cultural expectation on top of that, it becomes ingrained in your psyche, and it feels like the truth, the ultimate truth. And so you measure yourself against your ability to meet those standards of ultimate truth. And what I've learned is there's probably no such thing as like an ultimate truth, and we're all sort of determining our own paths. We can be influenced. We're heavily influenced by our culture, by our families, by our DNA, by our heritage. But we really do get to define what success means for ourselves, and that can be really holistic. So for me, it really needs to be about my personal life and my professional life, and it needs to be mind, body, spirit. So I really need to take care of myself physically and mentally and emotionally, take care of the ones I love, and that I'm responsible to, and then also allow myself to express myself creatively in the world. And for me, a lot of that is business. Business is a creative process for me. So I've come to believe that we do get to design that for ourselves. And I really didn't believe that early on. I really tried to force myself into doing all of these things. I was very ashamed and embarrassed. I still have a little bit of discomfort being a single woman. I feel like, being looked at like, oh, well, yeah, she's just another divorced business executive. And, no wonder she's successful in business, but she can't, So I think we have a lot of those judgments, and I just have to let go. I have to accept that those things are out there, but let go of my old sort of belief system.
Thank you, ladies, for sharing your reflections. It's an important reminder for all of us that leadership requires moments of unlearning.